The fall of ancient Rome was one of the most devastating economic collapses in history. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled 20% of the world's population, funded massive architectural projects, and established 200 years of peace and prosperity under Pax Romana. Yet Roman citizens would go from peace, bread, and circuses to plague and foreign invasion in a few generations. But what exactly caused its economic collapse, and what lessons can we learn from it? Now, the short answer is it's pretty complicated. The study of ancient economies remains highly speculative due to a lack of surviving records. However, we will do our best to explore it and analyze the economic rise and fall of ancient Rome. Now let's start in 753 BC, when Rome was founded as a tiny village along the Tiber River. At first, it was ruled by kings before they were overthrown, and the Roman Republic was established in 509 BC. Rome was able to grow its power through war on its surrounding neighbors, and also more peacefully through diplomacy and alliances. So when you think of ancient Rome, you might think of the city of Rome. But at this time, 90% of the population lived in the countryside, and in the early days, many were small self-sustaining farmers who tilled their land for grains alongside their family. In 146 BC, after defeating its main rival power Carthage in the Third Punic War, Rome gained massive wealth by unlocking natural resources in newly conquered provinces and now having complete control of trade routes. Rome acquired Sicily after the First Punic War, the Iberian Peninsula after the Second, and parts of northern Africa after the Third. The silver mines in Spain were especially lucrative, providing a significant influx of profits. And that same year, in 146 BC, Rome had also fought and gained control of Greece. So after waging and winning wars, this opened up key trade routes along the Mediterranean Sea and also new trade routes for long-distance trade with India and China. From India, they received spices like pepper, cotton, and precious stones, while silk came from China along the famous Silk Road. Roman imports also included ivory from northern Africa, metals from Spain and Britain, and amber from the Baltic region. And the goods Rome exported were largely cereals, wines, and olive oil, all essential commodities that supported Rome's agriculture-driven economy. Now, while agriculture was the backbone of the Roman economy, other sectors like trade, mining, and manufacturing also played important roles, and Rome relied heavily on imports from regions like the East for luxury items and raw materials. Citizens of Rome could experience luxuries from across the empire and saw a level of prosperity never seen before.
Wow, look at all of this. What is that? That came all the way from the Far East. You have to try it. I'll take a little bit of everything.
From 27 BC to 180 AD, Rome experienced a 200-year period that became known as its Golden Age, Pax Romana. And this period saw internal peace, stability, economic growth, and territorial expansion. Now, unlike modern economies during this time period, militaries could produce much more economic output. Conquering new lands with significant wealth produced plunder, arable land, an influx of slaves, and tributes paid to Rome. And when the Roman army was not at war, to stay busy they worked long hours doing hard labor to build roads, forts, aqueducts, and other infrastructure. Agriculture fed the empire, the army maintained law and order while also building necessary infrastructure, and slavery was increasingly used for agricultural labor. So by conquering more territory, which included new slaves, the system of small Roman farmers gradually declined and was instead replaced with large estates called latifundias. Now, owned by wealthy Romans, these estates were worked by slaves and often produced surplus crops like olives and wines for commercial sale and to feed the Roman army. And estimates suggest anywhere from 10 to 20% of the population were slaves either from birth or by capture. And different from other societies that had slavery, in ancient Rome some slaves were freed over time and others could buy their freedom. Now, with this shift to latifundias, thousands of landless small farmers began moving into the city, creating a large, poor urban class. The grain dole was then introduced in 123 BC and allowed men in the city to purchase grain at subsidized prices. By 58 BC, it was shifted to be completely free, giving grain to over 300,000 men, or 30% of the city's population. And this marked one of the earliest and most significant examples of a state-run social welfare system. Emperors could limit famine and civil unrest with a free issue of grain, as well as lavish gladiatorial games. Rome became the first city in human history to reach 1 million inhabitants, and the empire would reach its peak territorial size in 117 AD. Now, while times were relatively good during Pax Romana, this period of internal peace, stability, and economic growth would not last. Soon, things would take a turn for the worst. The decline of ancient Rome, just like its rise, had multiple causes and was not a singular event, but was spread out over the span of 300 years. In the late years, ancient Rome's economy increasingly became more of a centrally planned economy, where the government had significant control over resource allocation and production. And this included a rise in state-controlled industries, price controls, high taxation, large public projects, and growing regulations. And with a growing military and government bureaucracy, the weakness lay in the large administrative costs and decline in productivity. Many professions, including butchers, bakers, and iron workers, were ruled by strict government regulations. And in many large towns, the state became a large employer, with some estimates suggesting that half the population was part of the bureaucracy. Now, to try and help cover rising government costs, starting around 64 AD with Emperor Nero, Rome began engaging in the practice of coin clipping.
I promise to lower taxes, continue the dole for free grain, and we must build that new golden palace with a revolving dining room. Sir, that would severely deplete the treasury. I need more funds. Why don't we just clip everyone's coins to generate more money and fund all of this? Oh, that's brilliant.
Now, the practice of coin clipping involved collecting the coins of the population, melting them down, and reissuing a bigger supply of new coins with less gold or silver content in each. And this allowed the government to generate more money than it could spend on increased government expenditures without needing to increase taxes. But in doing so, it also reduced the real wages of workers. And this would turn into a slippery slope as it became common practice among Rome's late emperors. Then, in the 2nd century AD, epidemics and plagues began to decimate the Roman population. The Antonine Plague, lasting 15 years from 165 AD to 180 AD, had a fatality rate of 25% on those infected and wiped out an estimated 5 to 10 million people across the empire, or 10% of the total population. Now, this crippled the military, economy, and social structure of ancient Rome. Facing a declining population, a lower birth rate, and with ongoing battles, Emperor Marcus Aurelius was forced to enroll slaves, gladiators, policemen, and criminals to replenish the Roman army. With a serious decline in population, this also led Roman emperors to import many German barbarians from the north. Mass amounts of small farms had been abandoned across Italy, so much so that in 193 AD, Emperor Pertinax offered the farms free to anyone who would till them. To these farmers, he also granted an exemption from all taxes for 10 years and freedom from any government duties. Many urbanites began to leave the city in search of empty plots of land and turning to self-sufficiency. Then, just 70 years after the Antonine Plague in 249 AD, the Plague of Cyprian hit the empire from 249 to 262 AD. And at the height of the outbreak, over 5,000 people were dying each day in Rome, which had a population of roughly 500,000 to 1 million people at the time. In Alexandria, the second largest city in the empire, the population fell from 500,000 to 190,000 during the plague. So, alongside plague and war, other factors like the comforts of luxury and moral decay are debated as causes that may have led to the population decline first among the educated classes and eventually down to the agricultural classes. And with the collapse of the slave population and the latifundia farms for provincial grains, Italian exports could not keep up with their imports of foreign goods, and the empire's precious metal supply slowly drained to the east. An expanding government bureaucracy, rising costs for armies and public works, and a declining population all led to growing expenditures and higher taxes on the public. The gains of military conquests had diminished over time as the empire grew larger and was now more difficult to defend and administer. Coin clipping was increasingly used as the late Roman emperors minted millions of coins in an effort to spend more, and this flooded the economy, leading to high inflation and coinage debasement as the amount of silver or gold in Roman coins decreased significantly throughout the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. And in 250 AD, silver content had dropped to 50%, and by 275 AD, it was less than 5%. All of this snowballed on an already decaying economy. So during the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome would see 26 emperors in the span of 50 years, under pressures of foreign invasion, economic decline, and civil war. Eventually, Rome had fallen apart from within, and when the barbarians were at the gates, it was basically already over. With the fall of Rome, the empire had already moved east, heading its capital in Constantinople. In the west, other cities like Genoa, Milan, and Naples grew in importance, and the attention shifted away from Rome. The city of Rome would ultimately collapse in population as people left the city to work on empty plots of land in hopes of self-sufficiency. Europe switched to a feudal system, and long-distance trade collapsed. Following the collapse, centuries of decay, and after the sack of Rome in 1527, Rome's population was barely 10,000 people. It had become a ghost town. Its population wouldn't fully recover to 1 million people until the 1930s, nearly 1,500 years after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Now, while the economy of ancient Rome remains substantially more primitive compared to the economies of first world countries today, its rise and subsequent collapse can still teach us valuable lessons. Rome thrived when it had internal stability, was able to extract resources from conquered territories, and controlled key trade routes that allowed the free flow of commerce. However, with rising military and governmental costs, a rapid increase in high inflation from coinage debasement, and a decimated population, the walls eventually caved in on the classic civilization. And there you have it, a brief history of ancient Rome's economic rise and fall. Comment your thoughts down below, and if you want to learn more about one of the worst debt crises in recent history, click the thumbnail on screen to watch our video on how a debt crisis ruined Greece. You won't want to miss it, and we'll see you guys there.